Well, normally I would only show you one typewriter at a time, but today we're going to look at least briefly, not one, not two, not three, but four Futuras. When I began thinking about this video, I remembered a song called "I've Got a Lovely Bunch of Coconuts All Standing in a Row." It was one of the verses. And so I've got a bunch of lovely Futuras all standing in a row. Now here's the odd thing. I normally try to avoid collecting more than one type of typewriter. That is one version of something. And then I ended up with four Futuras. Slightly different, which I'll explain in a second. But there's a story behind that. And it's kind of unusual. I think that's half the fun of this one, is that when you collect things, sometimes things get a little weird and go a way you don't imagine. So here we have four Royal Futura typewriters. And they're part of my collection, but I only set out to get one. Here's how this happened. We're going to go way back here to this Royal Futura right here. And if you've been with Typewriter Tuesday then, before we became Typecast, you might remember this. This is a Futura 600. Now here's the thing to think about with Royal Futuras. They were made from 1958 to about 1962. And they came in three different models. There was a 400, a 600, and an 800. And as you can imagine, the higher the number, the more bells and whistles that came with it. This that we're looking at now is a 600. And we talked about this some time ago. But I ended up getting an 800 because I wanted the 800, the upper one if I could. And that is this one here. And then something else happened. This one had an issue or two that I had to work with, as did this one over here. And to try to fix those issues, I bought another Futura so I could take parts off of it. I was going to do a transplant. And I bought this beautiful blue one, which we'll spend more time talking about in a little bit, for $10. Because it was listed on eBay as for parts or repair. So $20 for delivery, $10 for the typewriter, and I thought I was getting a good deal. Here's the problem, as I will show this to you later, is this is a great typewriter, and I couldn't tear it down to use parts from it because it really wasn't that broken. But let's get a running start at this. Let me share with you how some of these came to be in my collection and why I have them, and a little bit more about the Futura line. As we come back to the 600, this is from 1959. It has a pica-sized font, that's the larger one, so 10 characters per inch. But as a 600, it doesn't have everything that the 800 has. What it does have is very good. Now, if we had a 400, I don't have a sample of that, an example of that. But if we had a 400, we would not have these buttons here. That is clear, and the magic column set. They're really tab settings, is how most of us would refer to them today. It wouldn't have that on the 400. You couldn't set your tabs. The 600 you could. You paid more money for the typewriter, but you could at least set your tabs. When it moves up to the 800, then things begin to change. Now, we looked at this one about 5 months ago, so I'm not going to go into great detail about it. It's a beautiful little typewriter on the inside, works quite well, and I got this for the princely sum of free. Somebody was moving in the area, they were selling on a local listing, they'd asked $20, they cut it down to $10, said if I could get there by the next morning, which I could easily, they would just give it to me. And I did. The case is horrible. I don't know that I can redeem the case, but we will see. Now, one of the differences, though, as we move into the 800 from the 600, is notice there is no paper support in the back. On all the 800s, they have this V-shaped, almost like television antennas at the back of the typewriter. but the 400 and the 600 did not. Also, the other thing to notice is the paper table, this thing right here, that the paper will rest against with its guide, is metal. It looks fine, color's great. No one would ever think about it. They didn't see that in the more modern version, that is the higher end, that there is a plastic, clear plastic paper table as opposed to the metal one. And that's one reason I ended up having to get the fourth one of these, because that's one of the parts that's missing on this 800 here. Now it's going to be hard to see this, I think, on the video, but there is no paper table at all. It's supposed to go here. This little thing here is what the slide hits, and I'm missing that. It's supposed to fit into these little holes over here, and I'm missing that, and I felt kind of sad about that because I have this wonderful typewriter, and what makes this one unique is it's cursive. The typeface is cursive. It's the only cursive I have in my collection. Some people seem to run across them all the time, but I had never seen one before. Wanted one, so I ended up getting this, but because it was missing a couple of things, I didn't pay very much money for it, but I was going to fix it up. That was the goal anyway. And to do that, I needed some parts. So I bought this parts machine for $10 plus some shipping. It's an 800, so all the parts would be interchangeable with it. But then when I got it, I found out that it was just beautiful all the way around. Doesn't have a scratch on it. I was told that in the description that the keys did not strike the platen. They do. I did have to do some adjustment, and that the carriage would not move all the way over as it should. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but I was able to fix that very quickly and without any expense. Well, a little bit more about the Futura line before we move into the specifics of this. The 600 was the middle one, and as I pointed out, it has a few things, or it's lacking a few things that the 800 has, but it still had a little more than the 400, which would be the tab settings, and you can see that it has a tab key. But the other thing it doesn't have is two other keys. It became the goal later on in producing typewriters and keyboards is to get a full-size keyboard, and by that what they meant is it would have the same number of keys as the typewriter you might have at work, or if you were going to school and learning on their typewriters, they would have more keys. They would have a set of 44 striking keys. I call them striking keys because they hit the platen. So they're ones with typefaces, type slugs on them, and would leave that impression as opposed to, say, a shift key. But everything else is about the same. So on this 800, as we come over here, we see that it does have a number 1 key, and we see that it has a plus equals key to it. So it has the full keyboard that you would find on any office machine. All the internals are about the same. They all have this lovely push button release. It is a segmented shift. That means the carriage, not the carriage, but the type basket lowers as opposed to the carriage rising. So it's a segmented shift. That saves a little work, and if you're spending a lot of time on them, as a student might do, or somebody working from home, or in a small office, it saves a lot of stress on the hands. We'll come over to this. We see it's basically the same thing, but this one also has twin packs. You'll notice that the ribbons look different. Over here, this is what you normally see, a real ribbon wound around it. These are enclosed, and the system that the Royal designed is one that you could change the ribbon in less than 30 seconds with these. It's very easy to do. Unfortunately now, though, getting these twin packs is kind of tough. But nonetheless, there it is. So they all have that same kind of system. Pop the hood on all of them. I'm not going to see much difference there with them. They had basically the same typeface except for the cursive, but you could get them in Elite, 12 characters per inch, as opposed to the Pica, 10 characters per inch. French and English keyboards were available. All of these are U.S. English. They were made in the United States mostly, but also in Canada. So all of these are pretty clean. Put all these down. Okay, so all of these are clean. This one was extremely dirty. I could have planted corn in the amount of dirt I got out of it. But it did clean up nicely. So I've been very happy with that. But some of them have little problems with them that I wanted to fix. I've shown some. And this one has, for example, very loose. I'm turning the platen knob, but it's very loose before it starts actually moving the platen. And the reason is, over on this side, if I can get close enough, you can see that hole. There's supposed to be a set screw there. So I was missing a set screw and another screw for this. Again, the reason I wanted a parts machine, as well as the paper table need for this one. And then I was surprised by what I got with this 800 here. All right, you see there's some variation in colors. In the 800, you had many more choices in colors because it was the upper end of this particular line. An 800 back in the early 1960s, late 1950s, cost about $125, and those are $1960, say. So it's close to $1,000 in today's money. So they were fairly expensive, and that's why you could get some extra amenities, the extra keys, and a cover. Only the 800 came with a cover. But you could get different colors. This is periwinkle blue. Some of the other colors that you could get was the meadow green. I've seen these in green. The mist gray was very popular. A lot of those still around. And then one that's sometimes called cocoa, or it's called pink salmon. Salmon pink. I don't know, it doesn't look pink to me. It does look a little like salmon, I suppose. Doesn't look cocoa to me either. And then there is the mist gray that these came in. All right. Well, let's shift our position and take a closer look at the surprise Futura 800 that I got a while ago. Well, we're back in the library now, where I keep some of my typewriters. And we're going to take a closer look at the surprise Futura 800 that I got a short time ago. And again, I got this typewriter for purposes of using parts to fix two others like them. And in the process of all this, I ended up with 4 Royal Futuras. So I'm probably going to need to sell some of these off to make room for the other typewriters. But let's go ahead and take a quick look at the 800, since we spent some time a few months back looking at the 600. As you can see, it's a beautiful typewriter. I do love the periwinkle blue of the typewriter. Two-tone. Again, you could have these in gray or a salmon color. I had more choices with the 800, but like many of the typewriters, it's got all the basic elements that we've talked about in many other typewriters. But this one, when I first got it and got it out of the case, and the case was just covered in mold, it was kind of scary looking. It was put gloves on before you clean it kind of case. Cleaned up very, very nicely. And then I began looking at this and I noticed it doesn't have a scratch on it. That kind of surprised me, because normally something that is almost, 50 years old, 58 years old, it's 1960, and it didn't have a scratch on it. I've been very surprised by that. Overall, it was very clean, but this doesn't have a mark on it, outside of a little bit of dirt and the like. And I would expect that a typewriter that was made in 1960, so that's 40 and another 18, that's 58, almost 60 years old, typewriter would have far more scrapes, bruises, chipped paint, other kinds of problems with it. a lot of corrosion, maybe even some rust. None of that. It was very clean. Well, that gave me a problem. What am I going to do now? And I thought, well, okay, so it's the innards that are the problem. The keys are not hitting the platen, the rubber portion of the carriage. And it turns out they were. The real problem came in that the typewriter would not advance all the way to the left. And the reason was the spring was not tight enough. Inside a typewriter like this, there is a mainspring. Think of a watch spring. And it's attached to the far end, the end over here, of the carriage. And every time you hit a key, every time you hit the space bar, it moves a notch to the left of the typist. And those can come loose, they can break, which is a real problem, and they can be a little dicey. So I thought, well, maybe that's a quick and sure way to make sure that I end up taking parts off this for other typewriters. Turns out I was wrong. I was able to tighten that spring and get it to work. Keys worked. Had to straighten them a little bit. Had to do a little tuning on it, but really not much. I don't think I spent over an hour getting this thing ready. So I ended up with a lovely typewriter with all of the great parts to it, and the Futura is indeed a wonderful typewriter. Okay, so again, this has all the keys, and that was becoming very popular in the upper end of portables. So you see there's a 1 key with an exclamation mark, and the plus equals key. Those are usually the first 2 that are gone, are missing on the lesser models, the less expensive models. Other than that, it has really a lot to commend it. It's a smooth typer, nice thick keys, tombstone style keys. They call them tombstone because when you look down at the top, they look like little tombstones. So tombstone style keys, nicely dished, which makes for comfortable typing. As you can see, there is a tab and tab settings, which they call column. Has a thing with Royal. Royal had this thing about using the word magic. So over here you can clear a tab by pushing. Over here you can set a tab by pushing, and you can feel it when you do it. So there's a new tab there. Very nice. Again, I love the pop-up button. Look down inside of it. This did not come with the twin packs, but it did come with some nice metal spools, so whenever it had been changed, at least we got the metal spools. And some of these, especially the lower models, like the 400 and the 600, had sort of a foam cushioning to deaden the sound, and those rotted away pretty quickly. In fact, when I had to clean the one that had that, I just took a paintbrush and brushed it out, and it just came off as dust. So in one of them I had to replace the sound deadening material. But in many of the 800s it came with a felt, and that lasted a very long time, and a corrugated front piece for design effect. So very, very nice in that sense. Again, it has some nifty little things. The red buttons up here are for the magic margin settings. It's trademarked. It says right on there. Trademark magic margin. And very easy to set your margins by pushing on them, and you can set the right the same way. Then it has all the regular stuff you'd expect. It has a paper bail, which is nice rubber rollers on the paper bail. I've always liked that. A little later, typewriters will get rid of those and just put the paper bail right on the paper, or they will use plastic in here to pin the paper next to the rubber platen, and that works very well. I like that quite a bit. Nice handle for lifting the paper bail, and it also has off to this side here the release for the carriage, so it just slides back and forth. Lever to release the pressure rollers beneath it will help guide the paper through, so you can just pull the paper out, or straighten it, because sometimes they go in crooked. It has the line guide Nice little red arrow there telling you how close you are getting to the end of your page. You set it at 0, and then off you go with it. 1, 2, and 3 line spacing. We also have here where you can release the platen and spin this freely. And then there's also the other ratchet release, which is a button that you push here and move it. Again, another, just as on the right side, on the left side, there's a release for the carriage. Nice detail on it. Even the paint is all in place, which kind of surprises me. So all in all, I was just really impressed, and slightly heartbroken that I couldn't take parts off to fix the others, but I was so jazzed about having such a nice typewriter land in my lap for all of $10 and $20 in shipping, that arrived twice as fast as I thought it would. It was just a good experience all the way around. Well, there it is, Royal Futura 800, a great example of it, and we will see about trying to do a little typing test here. This is a Royal Futura 800 typewriter from 1960. It is blue, and let's switch that up a little bit. And has the type. Flip around the box, jump over the lazy dog.